Well, welcome everyone, and we want to welcome you from the Tippie College of Business. We greet you and thank you for joining us for the Building a Successful Online Program from the Ground Up webinar brought to you by the Tippie College of Business and the staff of our Graduate Management Program. My name is Barbara Thomas and I'll be your moderator today. Now, before we get started, just a few quick housekeeping items. We will be taking questions today and answering them after the presentation. And because this is a webinar, we ask that you submit your questions in the Q&A button at the bottom of your screen rather than in the chat. We have also enabled live transcription, and so you should be able to see those words coming up along the bottom of your screen. If you would like to hide those, all you have to do is click the More button or the three dots and choose Hide Subtitles. Lastly, we do recommend that you choose Speaker View so that you can see our speakers larger than in the gallery view. So today I'm excited to introduce you to our panelists, and I'll start first with Jen Blackhurst. Jennifer is the Associate Dean for Graduate Management Programs and a Professor of Business Analytics at the Tippie College of Business. She holds a BS and MS in Industrial and Manufacturing Systems Engineering from Ohio University and a PhD in Industrial Engineering with a focus in Supply Chain Management from the University of Iowa. She was an early adopter of online course delivery in 2018 and assumed her current role as Associate Dean in 2020. She oversees Tippie's graduate management portfolio of full-time and part-time degree programs, along with a variety of professional certificates. Jan Fossey is a Senior Director of Online Operations at Tippie and came to higher education after nearly a 15-year business and industry career. She earned her bachelor's degree in management and an MBA in finance and marketing from the Tippie College of Business and has taught a variety of business courses at several institutions, including the University of Iowa. She was an integral member of the team that brought the vision of a fully online MBA to reality for the Tippie College of Business. Jill Tompkins is the Assistant Dean of Academics at Tippie, where she manages a team focused on course planning, curricular changes, academic policies, and registrar functions. She earned a bachelor's degree in political science from Yale University and a master's in international law and human rights from the University for Peace. Before working in higher education, Jill was a Fulbright scholar in Malaysia and worked with several refugee agencies, including the UN High Commissioner for Refugees throughout Africa and Middle East. Ali Yildirim is the Executive Director of Marketing and Recruiting at Tippie. He came to the University of Iowa in 2013 from a career in consumer goods, working with home and healthcare brands, including Vicks, Honeywell, and Braun. He earned his bachelor's degree in business from the University of Maryland and an MBA from the Carlson School of Management at the University of Minnesota. At Tippie, Ali leads a team of marketers, web strategists, and enrollment strategists who embrace data-driven marketing and a progressive digital marketing philosophy to support the college's enrollment goals. We look forward to bringing their expertise to us today. And now I'd like to hand the reins over to Jennifer Blackhurst. Jen?
Thank you, Barb. So I want to welcome everyone here today. We're really delighted to be able to share our journey and some of our lessons learned. And I hope at the end of the presentation, we have a really lively discussion with lots of questions. So I wanted to start out by just telling you a little bit about the Tippie College of Business. If we can go to the next slide. So just a quick background that, we're a top 25 business school accredited by the AACSB. But what we really want to focus on today is within our MBA portfolio, how we took our existing professional MBA and developed a fully online option and kind of where we are today in that whole entire journey, what we learned and some tips for those in the audience. If we can go to the next slide. we would like to start off with a poll just so that we can get a feel for the roughly 70 people in the audience where you are in your online journey. So you should see the poll have being popped up. And if you could just share and submit where we are at, and then my lights went off. We can get the results in just a second. This is always interesting for us to hear where other people are in the journey, because starting something like this or even expanding what you have can be a pretty daunting task. All right, so it looks like we have the results. Wow, so 62% already have an established online program, and then followed by we're considering, we have some online classes, but not a full program, and then we're in the midst of launching a program. So I hope that we can bring something to each of these subgroups as we move forward. Go to the next slide. So just a little bit about the history of the Iowa MBA. We started off back in the 1960s, shockingly before I was here. I wasn't here in the 1960s, and then went through a time with a number of innovations, but I'm going to skip forward to fall of 2019. At that time, we had about 800 students in our professional MBA program, and those students were spread across 3 sites within the state of Iowa. In 2019 is when we decided to really kick off the program. And our goal in kicking off that program, which seems a lifetime ago, was to start with intakes of about 40 students and eventually reach a steady state of about 250. One of the things that we really focused early on that you'll hear more about throughout the presentation is getting faculty involved in the really early stages. And this was not only related to socializing the idea and talking about what this could do for our students, the university and the college, but getting them involved really early on in the planning processes and setting the stage for what we were going to do. So we had a series of committees that were tackling things like how do we structure IP agreements, compensation, how do we even structure the program as a whole. So if we fast forward through the pandemic, which has truly been a whirlwind, we really are defining what we've done as a success for us here at Tippy. So in fall of 21, this semester was the first time that the online MBA program surpassed where we were with the professional MBA program. And so now we're in a situation where we have over 1,300 students, and we're tackling the next phases of innovation and how we can best serve our students, which is really our focus throughout this entire journey. So one of the other things that you'll be hearing about today is what we're calling the Iowa MBA program, where we're removing those barriers. So students can really choose the format that works for them, the modality that works with their lives, and removing barriers for them to pursue graduate education. If we can go to the next slide. Today, as I mentioned before, we're really going to talk about this in a series of phases, and you're going to hear from each of us what we did as we were thinking about getting started, as we were ramping up, and then really where we are now and what are some of the next steps. I hope we can share with you some of the things that we feel like we did really well, some of our challenges and how we address them, and are thinking about moving forward and addressing continued innovation and a continued focus on student success. So you can go to the next slide, but I'll be leading us through phase 1. So when we started thinking about launching the online program, and remember the formal launch was in 2019, one of the things that we thought about, which might be really applicable to many of those in the audience, is really, are we too late? Is there an appetite for this? Do we want to enter this space? Can we enter this space with a high quality and successful program? And so what we focused on, and you'll hear a little bit more from Ali, our executive Assistant Director of Marketing, is really doing extensive market viability, not only understanding, what our market looks like, how quickly we could ramp up, what would the structure of the program look like, all of these things wrapping up into making a very important decision for our college. And so Ali talked about making data-driven decisions, and collecting that data was really a part of that. And then finally, addressing skepticism, or I'm going to even frame it more as how could we lay out a plan for launching an online MBA program that would meet the student needs, that would continue our history of a high quality experience for our students in a format that was really entirely new to us. So that kind of kicked off what we were doing with our program. You go to the next slide. So I'll talk about phase one. And so our first step in phase one was really building a business case as we moved forward in this arena. So we, had started off with the professional MBA program prior to 2019. We had some ad hoc classes that were online that there was a gravitation towards our students. Our students really liked it, but it wasn't a formal program. And so really early on, what we wanted to try to do was get college-wide buy-in. And so this was all of the things that we were talking about, really getting the faculty involved, laying out very detailed plans, having faculty have a say in how we were developing the program and the classes. And then the next step really focused on determining the infrastructure that we needed for success. And so there were lots of decisions to make in this regard. And I'm going to turn it over to Ali to talk a little bit more about this decision process.
Thank you, Jen. So early on, we reached the decision point, and we had to make some build versus buy decisions. We naturally took a look at the online program manager landscape. For those of you who are new to the industry, OPMs, online program managers, are an important and sometimes controversial part of the online program ecosystem. OPMs can provide cradle-to-grave support for launching, operating online programs. And so, and one of the things we looked at was, what is their business model? How do they get compensated? Some work on a revenue share model, so they would like to charge you a percentage of your tuition dollars. Others are more unbundled, so more a la carte service providers where you pay a fee for a service. So it's important to understand their business model, and it's also important to understand what each OPM brings to the table as far as what specifically their core competencies are. But more importantly, it's important to understand where you need help as an organization. So at this point, we took a hard look at the infrastructure needed for running a successful online program. Is it in course development that we needed help? Is it in recording and studio capabilities? Or was it a technology platform that we were after or we were missing? Or did we need help with student acquisition? And within that, what part of it? Is it the marketing and paid media and lead generation, or is it kind of the recruitment and enrollment management side? So maybe it's all of the above. But starting to break things down is helpful to understand where exactly you have a need to outsource versus what you can build internally. In our case, we found that in many instances, we had the core capabilities in-house and we lacked capacity. So that was something we could solve in a different way by adding resources. We also discovered that the university, the broader university ecosystem we're in, had a lot of resources that perhaps weren't being utilized to their fullest potential. Maybe we were using them on an ad hoc basis, but never had we sat down and said, this is our vision, this is where we want to go. And do you have the capacity to be our partner? So throughout this process, doing the capabilities analysis made us more resourceful, smarter user of external resources, and helped us rationalize build versus buy decisions and ultimately minimize our expenses. In our case, with our specific circumstances, we did not want to sign up for an arrangement where we would share part of our revenue. especially as we suspected that the program would scale and the revenue would grow. We didn't want that cost base to grow along with it. So we decided to make a lot of these investments in-house.
Thanks, Sully. If we can go to the next slide. So once we made that decision, a next key step for us was doing some early pilot testing of new courses. And so this really involved committing early on to taking a handful of classes, a handful of instructors, and going through a formal design process. And this process was with our partner within the university, Distance and Online Education, and you'll hear us talking about them. The process, it was about 6 to 9 months as we developed these initial classes, where we learned about the best practices, developing frameworks and infrastructures and scaffolding to develop really the best experience for our online learners. I was actually a volunteer to be a part of that. I'm really happy I was because it helps me to be able to talk about it from a change management perspective. Plus, it was a really cool process to be involved with. The next thing that we really focused on was a constant focus on getting feedback from our students. What was working? What could we change? Even down to the time slots that we would offer our classes, or how classes were structured and how that structure meant that a student could learn more effectively. This is something that never stops for us, and we're reaching out to students through our student leadership groups, through surveys, through evaluations that are formal through the university mid-semester as well. The last thing that I'll mention in terms of the key steps was not taking our partners for granted. And when I talk about our partners, it's not just our faculty, where it was really our job as Graduate Management Programs Office to provide resources and guidance and structure along the way. The staff has been incredible in adapting, even how we schedule classes and how we communicate. But I view, and our entire program does, Distance and Online Education, which is our media team and our instructional designers, they are a key partner in literally everything that we do. So we could not have developed this really formal, structured, and comprehensive, well-connected program without those key partners. So what I'm going to leave you with in phase one is the next slide, which is really always have an experimental mindset. As we started this, as many of you are starting this, we didn't know all of the right answers. We had some core values that we wanted to continue to focus on: student success, making sure everyone involved was having a good experience, that we weren't sacrificing quality. But we needed to have a mindset that we could be agile, adapt quickly, fail in some cases, learn from that, and quickly move on to the next innovation. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to our next speaker to talk about phase two.
All right, thank you, Jen. I have the pleasure of talking about phase two today. So the ramp up and launch of a fully online degree. I'm going to concentrate primarily on two areas. So that would be preparing the program product or experience, and also preparing to welcome students. So in our case, our online MBA program was launched as an extension of our professional MBA program, meaning some parameters were already set. So things like the same admission standards, same courses, same credit hours, same faculty, and same cost. Now, there are certain things about launching an online program that are unique because of the online environment. And I'm going to spend some time talking next about developing online courses in more detail. As far as curricular planning and policy development, we spent a lot of time in this area too, but they're not necessarily unique to building an online program. So I'm not planning to address these particular areas, but that does mean I'm skipping over a lot of work done by many other team members to help build our online program. So if you are new to online learning, I would recommend beginning with a limited number of degrees or courses. Quality course development takes time, and we began with that single program, the MBA. This was our first online program. Although Jen mentioned this earlier, we did have some online courses in our professional MBA program prior to launching the MBA. I think dating back to about 2003 or so, we'd introduced some early online courses. So our plan with the launch of the program was to build out the portfolio of online courses over about 2 years. Gaining early buy-in from senior faculty to develop these online courses was incredibly key for us. As Jen mentioned, about 18 months prior to the launch of our program, we had a few senior faculty that were ready to begin online course development and pilot those courses over the 4 semesters leading up to the actual program launch. And having these early pioneers share their experiences about developing the online course, teaching in the online environment, and what their experience was like in the classroom with the students was really instrumental in helping to kind of ease some of the skepticism among other faculty members and create some excitement within a larger group to also follow in their footsteps and develop online courses and teach online. Now, providing a high quality online learning experience is super important. So determine what high quality means for you. For us, acknowledging that learning online truly is different than learning in that traditional face-to-face classroom meant that it was really critical that our online course development be rooted in online learning best practices. One of the first things we did to this end was develop quality course standards. And that included a lot of things. I'm just going to highlight a few here. One of those quality standards is that our online course development is a minimum of a 6-month process. And this really allows time for that iterative design process of building, refining, and improving. We also have a joint online course development process. So our faculty, who are subject matter experts, work very closely with our instructional design and media teams to build these courses. And that brings a nice balance of content expertise and then marrying that up with online learning best practice expertise, having those groups work together like that. We also have a requirement that our courses, our online courses, contain recorded lecture content that's produced in our on-campus studio with media team support. That really helps us make sure we're building high engagement, high quality lecture videos. And I have next a fantastic example of professionally recorded and edited lecture. So we have credit to Professor of Finance Tom Reitz and our media team, who work together to bring these course concepts to life utilizing some different media tools. So in the upper right corner, we see concepts being illustrated graphically using a green screen. We also see concepts being explained via the Lightboard. And then we also have VoiceOver Excel. All of these tools, all of these representations are in a single lecture, and that might be about 8 to 10 minutes long. So balancing course development flexibility. So again, our faculty, they are the subject matter experts. They have the flexibility to determine what the content will be in that course. But combining that with some standardization is also key in the online environment. We do have a few standardized components in our online courses. So let me talk you through those real quick. All of our online courses utilize a syllabus template. And within that template are not only the course level learning goals, but also module level, or you could think of them as weekly level learning objectives that tie specifically to the overall course goals. We have an online course template, and next I have a picture, an image of what our home landing page looks like. And inside this home landing page, it's hard to see, but there are a lot of online learning best practices built in. So for instance, the welcome video, the course intro video, providing some quick links. You see those buttons in orange that help students really quickly navigate to important parts of the course content, and then making it very clear, how do they get started, kind of creating that motivation so they get started in the course right away. So all of our online courses have a template in Canvas, and this just happens to be the home page. We also have some additional pages that have structure that build in some consistency. And in our online program, almost all of our online courses have a weekly live session. So we are able to bring students together to connect and learn from each other in the classroom, and also connect with their faculty member in that way. Now, there are several benefits to standardized course elements. One is just thinking about a consistent course experience for students. So when our courses look the same, function the same, navigate the same, students don't have to relearn each time they log into a course how to get started or where to find the important important pieces of information in that course. And another is the standardization also helped us create this cohesive package of courses that really belong together. Instead of, the opposite of that might be just a collection of ad hoc online courses, but they all look and operate differently. Creating internal excitement for the new program was also really valuable for us. We found even at program launch time, we were still internally socializing the idea of being able to successfully provide a high quality online experience for both faculty and students. So sharing these early wins, early successes was a real valuable step. We did some things like sharing the early lecture videos or the early course welcome videos so that people could see what could be produced in the studio. We also were able to share early on high-level class information with our faculty. So we could also share with them why students were choosing our program. We could also get people excited about the increased diversity we were seeing in the location that students were coming from and the employers that were represented. Because now we were pulling not only from the borders of Iowa or in the Midwest, but we were having students enroll in our program from around the country. Nurturing relationships. So everything about this collaborative course building effort, it was new for everyone. So it is important to listen and understand what we're doing well and where we can make improvements so that people really feel like their voice matters in all this change. This was a lot of change for us. And it was important in the beginning, and it continues to be important to make sure we've got the lines of communication open. So we're thinking about the online experience for both our faculty and our students. All right, lastly, I will talk about preparing to welcome students. So providing orientation programming for students isn't new, but another online best practice is to provide an overall programmatic orientation to what it's like to be an online learner. So we did create a specific program for our online MBA students in Canvas. We built it in Canvas with the same look and feel of our online courses. So we were using that course template so that early on students could get used to what the navigation of their online courses would be like. We had some overarching goals for this orientation. One was early networking opportunities, especially among MBA students. Being able to connect and grow their network is super important. And for us, building a connected community with a group that may never actually set foot on our campus, that was a new challenge for us. Of course, there was traditional onboarding knowledge. That was a significant part of the content. Things like how to set up your account, how to navigate the LMS, how to register for courses, the honor code, things like that. And then also content on preparing to be a successful online learner. Because learning online does require different or amplification of certain skills. And it's important to dispel myths about online learning, such as it's easier or it doesn't take as much time, because the opposite is really often what's true about online learning. Those expectations are really important to establish early. We also wanted our newly admitted online students to feel connected to our campus as soon as possible. So one strategy we employed early on was to assign a specific individual as their advisor so that they instantly had their person in the program that they could turn to with any questions. In widely communicating technology requirements, this may seem trivial, but we do have on our public-facing website specifics about technology expectations. And being transparent with the technology that's required to be successful in the courses, even before someone chooses that online program, is important. Online learning can be really effective, but having the right technology is super critical to that experience. And the short link here on the slide will take you to our webpage where those technology requirements exist if you'd like to check that out. And lastly, I would say build slowly if you can. One of the biggest benefits to gradual implementation of a new online program is making sure that those initial program structures you put in place are successful before adding complexity. It also gives time for stakeholders to adjust to this new way of teaching and learning. We do not have that luxury, and Jill Tompkins will next share details about unifying our professional and online programs earlier than anticipated.
Great, thanks, Jan. Once we launched the online MBA program in fall of 2019, students had to choose between the online program and a professional program, and their choice would dictate their access to courses based on modality. Our online courses are capped at 49 students, and we wanted to reserve the majority of them for our online students. So we saved just 15 seats, set them aside for the professional MBA students. Now we have over 700 MBA students, professional MBA students. So those 15 seats would quickly fill and often generated long wait lists. But we reasoned that at least these professional in-person students had access to the physical site locations and in-person courses. With initial cohorts of 40, we intentionally did not allow current PMBA students to transfer into the online program because we wanted new students. The barriers that we created early on were really the result of having a limited number of online courses developed, as Jan previously mentioned. We were essentially building the airplane while it was flying. Then, as the pandemic hit, our online MBA enrollments from around the country grew quickly, and we stretched to meet that demand. So instead of admitting the original 40 per cohort that we'd planned, we started admitting 120 to 160 students each semester since last summer. So obviously this meant we had to scale. We started offering 3 sections of core courses each semester instead of 1. But this was really only enough to satisfy the demand from the new online students. And still we had this unmet need from our in-person students for online courses. One way that we worked through the additional demand for our online courses was to share course content among our instructors. But that's actually a whole nother presentation, and it's one that Jan and Jen gave previously to an AACSB online affinity group this past spring. We can talk more about that in the question and answer section if you're interested in that. At Tippy, it's been important to us to listen to our students. So as we began to plan the return for in-person learning this fall, we surveyed our in-person students to understand what their modality preferences were going to be. 12% said that they wanted to finish their program in person, but an almost equal 11% said they wanted to finish fully online. So, and everybody else was somewhere in the middle, skewing more towards the online side. Our in-person students were responding well to the online experience, the convenience. There was no more commute, no more worrying about childcare. There was a live class session of an hour and a half instead of 3.5 hours. They could watch the recorded lecture content on their own time and rewatch it as they needed. And there was just more courses available online than in any given semester at the site, at their physical site location. So before the pandemic, online courses were popular. And I think as a result of the pandemic, they're even more so. Maybe some students who never would have thought about taking online courses experienced it because of the pandemic. And now we were looking at even more interest from our in-person students. So we had to determine what the right mix of offerings was going to be. For fall, there was still uncertainty about COVID. And we realized that we needed to sort of treat fall as a transition semester. So we preemptively decided not to offer as many courses as we would have pre-pandemic. We worked to forecast a total number of seats needed from both of our populations, PMBA and OMBA, and we looked at them together as one unit instead of as separate programs. And we made that many seats available online. And everything we offered in person, we just considered extra and bonus. So what did our professional MBA students do this fall once there was online courses available? 25% of their enrollments were in person and 75% remained online. Some of this may be COVID related. Another factor is that for the past 4 semesters, they'd had access to every course. And so that built up demand that was part of the normal site buildup, because they only had courses every so often, had evaporated. So our next step was to figure out how to break down the silos that we had built necessarily at the beginning, because we had originally really needed to maintain and ensure the online capacity for our online students. It was obvious where we wanted to go. We wanted to get to a program that was merged and had open access to courses, regardless of if you'd started as a PMBA or an OMBA. The question was, how do we get there? And so we used the summer and fall's registration periods to help incrementally move the needle. For summer, we had seat reservations again, but we experimented and shortened the time window. So instead of holding seats for the online students for 8 weeks, we shortened that to 4 weeks. Our PMBA students already knew that they needed to register early to get the most options available to them. And so we needed to drive that message home really and change the OMBA student behavior to drive them to register early to have the most choice. And this was part of that process. For summer, it worked. Our PMBA students got off wait lists much more quickly so they could prepare for the semester ahead. And even the online students who registered a bit late or were admitted late, close to the start of the new session, they had plenty of choice. As we looked to fall, we wondered if we could remove the registration barriers entirely. But in the end, we weren't really ready to do that just yet. So we settled on 2 weeks. So from 8 to 4 to 2 weeks. And this winter and spring, we won't have any seat reservations at all. This fall, we had no waitlist practically, and the student experience surveys showed an increase in satisfaction with our course availability. So we were moving in the right direction. Again, as we returned to in-person courses, we knew we couldn't go back to the way it was before the pandemic. To try to make that in-person experience a little bit more appealing to our students, we started offering hybrid courses this fall. So this is basically the online course, but with in-person sessions instead of Zoom sessions. So students benefit from the lecture content being consumable on their own time, the reduced class sessions, but they still have that in-person networking aspect that so many students crave, and particularly after the pandemic, I think. So this seemed like the best of both worlds of in-person and online learning. Then, given the overall shift in demand, we decided to reduce drastically the number of courses we'll be requesting and hosting in person next year. So pre-pandemic, we may have had 36 to 40 courses at a site. Next year, we'll have 12 at each site. That allows us to shift the faculty resources online, and it also provides an in-person student experience for those that want it. Although, again, with a little bit less choice or a little bit more spread out over time. It feels like all we've been doing is changing, and I'm sure we're not done. We're going to keep having to adjust as we see what the student needs are and what the marketplace needs are. But this is actually one thing that Tippy does really well. We make tough decisions, like our willingness, our decision to end the full-time MBA program a few years ago. And we continue to innovate our programming to meet the needs of the marketplace and our students. So what's next for us? The next big change we're working through is transitioning our current 11-week and 5-week course sessions to 8 weeks, standardizing on 8 weeks. This provides a more consistent pacing experience for our students and our faculty. It allows us to offer courses on a more predictable schedule and improve the balance of courses across the semester. We're also seeking Board of Regents approval to expand our part-time Masters of Science and Business Analytics degree online. It operates in the exact same locations as our PMBA off-campus sites, 3 different locations in Iowa, but we want to be able to offer it nationally as well. The Business Analytics Department was awarded the prestigious UPS Smith Prize this year, which recognizes the leading university in the world for excellence in preparing students to practice in the area of analytics. So again, we want to make this available to students regardless of their geography. Our experience in the MBA will help guide us. We'll be able to jump over the barrier that, at the beginning that we had to create because we have more online analytics courses already developed. So we'll be able to go straight to a unified program once it's approved, if it's approved. We know from current student behavior and feedback that the MSBA analytics students seem to prefer online courses, at least coming out of the pandemic, that's the truth. So as Jen mentioned, this fall is the first time we've had more online students than professional MBA students. And as she mentioned, 1,300 students, more than that. And they're coming from 43 different states and the District of Columbia. So we're not just an Iowa program. We're not even located primarily in the Midwest anymore. In August, we announced the merger of our professional and online MBA programs into the Iowa MBA. So again, beginning this spring, there will be no distinction, and students can freely take courses in the modality that they want. It may not be where we thought we would be 2 years ago when we launched our online MBA program, but the Iowa MBA really allows us to deliver a high quality program with maximum flexibility to students regardless of their geography. So thank you for allowing us to share this part of our journey with you. We'd love to answer any questions that you might have at this point.
Great, thank you so much, Jill. I do want to start with a question for Jen. Jen, if you could tell us, how much did the cost of a third-party online program manager affect your decision to build your program internally?
I'll ask Ali to jump in and help with this as well, but it really was looking at, okay, what did we think we needed? And then what capabilities did we have already in-house? And we wanted to spend a lot of time thinking about what we wanted our program to be and how we could scale and how much control we wanted to have in that process. So of course, cost played a big role in that decision, but it was also about how we wanted to design our program, move forward with it, and scale.
Ali, do you have anything to add on that?
I'm sorry, I was typing a response to one of the other questions.
Excellent.
Can you repeat the question, Barb?
Sure, it's about the cost of the third-party online program manager and the decision that we made. In addition, we do have another question that's asking about the trade-offs with that and whether you had to kind of make a decision about things that you would sacrifice choosing the internally developed method rather than the OPM.
I think you're sacrificing speed to market. There is a learning curve every time you enter a new market. And it's just on the marketing side, kind of what campaigns work, what geographies work. So there is error in that if you do that in-house, that you have to go through that yourself versus being able to rely on somebody else's learning curve. That said, longer term, for us, playing the longer game made a lot more sense. I think we didn't love the idea of not having that know-how ever. And so that just creates a dependency that I'm not sure that we were comfortable with, knowing that this wasn't some niche project, somebody's pet project. This is a core portfolio change that we want to make sure anything that is of strategic value, we kept close to home. Another area we needed a lot of help was course design. And that was one we looked very closely at, outsource, because frankly, we just didn't have it in-house. That was a decision to say, you know what, for us to build BuyIn, build continuity, consistency, that is central to the product and the quality of the program that ultimately, we can learn from people and we can have a lot of conversations. But when it comes to executing, we do need to hire, we need to build that competency in-house.
Great, thank you
so much.
And I
think if I could also add that the speed and agility to which then once we got up and running, that we could update our content and customize content from semester to semester, and more than just a review cycle, which of course we have formal review cycles every few years. That was another key part of it as well.
Great. I'm going to take the next question to Jan. Jan, can you highlight some of the faculty sharing of course materials that were used early in the development process? And then in addition, we do have a couple of questions in the chat that have to do with some of the elements of the courses, like synchronous elements, if they're optional, if they're required, etc. Could you take that, Jan?
Sure. Let me start out, and Jen, I'd love for you to also contribute to this answer. There's so much in this question, right, to unpack all of the scaling that we needed to do because of, the original intakes planned at 40, and then the summer of 2020, we enrolled at 120, and then that fall 160. So it required us to ramp up quickly. And perhaps some of the choices we made under pressure might not have been exactly the choices that we would have made if we'd had the luxury of more time. But our model is really to take the online course that's been developed using the online learning best practices and share that with additional faculty to teach that from those materials and teach that course. And by bringing in and involving more people to teach, that has actually given us the ability to keep the class sizes small, as opposed to, another way to do that would be to double or triple the number of students in a class, but have the same instructor who developed the course teach it. So that's kind of a high level answer, and there may be more questions there because again, there's a lot to unpack. But Jen, what would you add?
So, and this ties back to one of the questions I said I'd like to address. So we have faculty work with the instructional design team in distance and online education. And I mentioned the lead time is about 6 to 9 months to really train that faculty to have them work hand in hand with the instructional designer. And that will involve creating the entire class, the structure, the rubrics, the assessments, as well as the videos. What we've been trying to do is say, hey, we have these pre-recorded videos. They're very professional. These should really cover the basics of the class, almost viewing it like a textbook. But then as we hand off classes to other faculty that didn't develop the videos, how do we do that in a way that the instructor can have ownership, can be excited about the class, can insert themselves into the class? And so that's kind of been our next biggest challenge, and really working hard with our faculty and the instructional design team to train faculty on how we can customize. You can embed short videos. How do you use the synchronous time? One of the questions was, in what format of our class are our classes? Most of them are the recorded content with some synchronous Zoom time. So that scaling part of it, while maintaining the consistency and the high quality and having it be professionally developed, has been a real challenge.
Great,
Go
ahead.
I was just going to add, you did a great job explaining that, Jen, and it makes me think back to that principle, right? It's about having flexibility, creative, and having standardization, but then helping others learn, like, okay, where can we apply the creativity to the course too? And so that whole blending of standard but creativity and customization is really key. And we have 3 to 4 common standard components in the courses, and then outside of that, it's up to the individual instructor to be the one to lead that academic discussion and dialogue forward.
Great, thank you so much. So Jill, I'd like to go to you next. Can you talk a little bit about the reasons why the Tippie College made the change to the 8-week format?
Sure. So right now we have the split with 11-week and 5-week. We also have 6 weeks in the summer. And so there was just a lot of switching back and forth. And the primary department delivering the 5-week courses was our management and entrepreneurship department. They were delivering 80% of those courses. And so it was just a lot of demands on their faculty to shift back and forth. And we didn't offer the quant type courses in the intersession. So it impacted our students' ability to finish it as quickly as they might want if they were looking for a finance degree or an analytics degree. And so this will allow us to really balance the offerings much more evenly across the semester and help students progress in the way that they want in a timely fashion.
Great. Jan, a question for you. Who owns the video recorded lectures? Is it owned by the faculty, the administration, and who determines how those recordings can be reused?
Yep. So that was part of the very early faculty involvement, setting some parameters for how the IP would be handled, and also kind of right of first refusal around the investment of time upfront to build the course, and then also have the right to teach it, because time is incredibly valuable. So in our case at the university, when someone develops a course, they have the ability to use any component of that course for their own purposes, creative, academic, otherwise, with the exception of the recorded content lectures that are created in our studio on campus utilizing university resources. So that, and along with that comes that right of first refusal, right? Trying to protect kind of that investment of time up front to build the course, and then having that pay off subsequently when they teach the course.
Great, thank you. Jen, we do have a question about the faculty. Specifically, is there a designated MBA faculty, and how many faculty it might take to actually run such a program in a steady state? Do you kind of want to give a picture of how it is here at Tippie?
Yeah, and I'll ask Jill to jump in as well. My first response to that is, oh, what is steady state, right? Because we've been through so many changes. So one of the highlights I feel of our program is that we do have, our research faculty, our tenure track faculty heavily involved, in many cases leading the development of the classes and co-development that we found to be really best practice. So we don't have just specific MBA faculty, but we have faculty that are trained and ready to go with all of these classes. We do have sets of core classes and sets of electives, and so that changes the mix as well. Jill mentioned in one of the comments that by spring we're going to have 50 online classes developed, and so it's really part of her team's job to kind of map out what we need to offer and when, and juggling in which modality we need to offer. Jill, do you have any more to add on that?
Yeah, there was another question about if all of our courses are offered online and in person. So we have made the decision that some courses that even before the pandemic would sometimes have to be canceled because of low enrollments, marketing courses in particular, would only be offered online. So, we're still offering all of the core in person, and a couple of electives each year, right? And then it'll cycle through, so they have access to more than just 2 or 3 over the course of maybe, the 2 or 3 years that they finish our program, and that would be supplemented by the online courses as well. So the in-person offerings we have had to pull back because of the student demand and faculty constraints, and it's just a better use of our faculty to shift those online. And yet we are committed to still maintaining and offering in-person courses to students.
And if I can add, sorry, Barbara, I keep adding to our
okay.
answer, but this was super interesting to us in that, this semester when we are back offering some face-to-face classes, that roughly, Jill, you might have mentioned it in your part of the talk, only 25% of our in-person professional MBA students that would typically go to a site, only a very small percentage of those students chose to take those in-person classes. They're taking the online classes.
So next is a question, and I'm not sure who might be best for this, but it's a question about networking opportunities for online students. Is there someone who would like to take that?
I can try to take that one, Barb.
Great, thank you.
Is there anything else specific about it other than networking opportunities?
Just asking about them. What do we offer?
So initially within the program, one of the when we were first starting, we made sure we were setting up some student experience programming around there's career advice. So we would do each semester we do something related to career, a webinar, career planning. We did coffee with the dean when each time we kicked off a new intake of students, and that was a very well attended event. And then we would do a professional speaker, oftentimes an alum, to come in and talk with students. So we started out, I would say, kind of small, and those are the events that we built in. And also the orientation was built in a way so it was robust enough to allow students for each individual intake to introduce themselves and respond to each other. So that was really great too, that students could immediately upon being entered into the program, look for others who are in the program that might be near them, work for the same employer, that sort of thing. And there was a story at one point, we had 3 individuals from Minnesota, Minneapolis area, and they discovered each other, that they were in the introduction section, that they were all working for the same employer, maybe a couple floors apart. So that was an effective tool. Now the program's bigger, and we do have a lot of the programming, like everyone, right? Coming out of the pandemic, there were so many things that were done in person, but now we're all growing our library of what we can do online. So it really seems like almost anything that we could have done in person, we can now replicate in some way virtually as well. So I know they've introduced the student experience team has introduced a Hawkeye Hour. I know the online MBA team in particular, they scheduled a Hawkeye watch game. I think
where they're actually traveling, right? One advisor is traveling to Chicago and one to Minneapolis. So those will actually be in person for our online students in some bigger markets.
Yep. And I know I'm missing some things that they're doing, but it's kind of that experimentation, right? So just trying some things, what works, what do the students respond to, what do they want? And we do have a advisory board with our students as well from each of the sites and online, so they can talk to us about, hey, what would you like to do? What kind of programming are we not offering that you'd like to see?
Another option we're thinking and we're trying to figure out the logistics of is for next fall to offer an online course that has an option to come for 2 days in person at the end, tied to a football game timing, so that they can come back, or they can come and have the Hawkeye experience. A lot of our students have never maybe been to Iowa, and some may be alumni. So it gives them an opportunity to come to campus in a limited way while accomplishing the end of a class. So that's also something that we're looking to do, sort of a destination class, if you will.
Wonderful, very helpful. So I would say this may be one of our last questions, but could you tell us more about how a student is matched with an advisor and more about that advisor's role?
Sure, I can take that. So previously, students would apply to the professional MBA program at a specific site or online. And so our advisors are tied to one of those, what we call learning centers. Now that we have the Iowa MBA, we had to figure out what to do with the assignment of students. So we are using a 26-mile radius within our sites. So if they're in Des Moines, within 26 miles of Des Moines, and maybe a pocket here or there, if they're in Ames and they're coming to Des Moines, that's the natural community that we can build. And so they're assigned to based on their location. If they're beyond the 26-mile radius, then they're considered online. But again, that doesn't dictate access to courses. That's just more about community building. And our advisors are really working with students on course planning. What are their goals? Which courses would make sense for them to take?
We've also revamped our career services group that we're really focusing on what can we offer to this really growing population that in many cases is different than the types of students that we've had in the past. So offering not only advising from a class standpoint, but career coaching and what can we do to really help our students along their journey.
Great. Well, thank you, Jen, and thank you to all of our panelists today for sharing your expertise. And we want to thank everyone for attending today's session. If you have additional questions, we want to encourage you to reach out to any of the panelists. You'll see their pictures and their contact information is there on your screen. In just a moment, you'll see a quick post-event survey, and we'd be grateful if you would share your thoughts about today's presentation. We'll be sending a recording of our presentation as well by email. You'll find this presentation and all of our past webinars on the Tibby College's YouTube channel. So on behalf of the Tibby College of Business today, we want to thank you for joining us and have a great day.